So very quickly, there are probably some things that some of you already know, something that you don't already know. So I'll try to adapt to, let's say, a diverse audience today. But first off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Marie Skłodowska reactions work program in general. So basically, what you need to know is that at the core of Marie Skłodowska reactions is really human capital development. So it's really the researchers training, their skills generation and their career development to enhance their employability in the future. So this is a call that is bottom-up. By bottom-up, we mean that there is no prescribed topic of research. You can submit any proposal in any area of research. You just have to choose one of the 8 scientific panels that we have. But you can come up with any idea that you want. There's a lot of mobility between sectors, between countries, between disciplines. This is also at the core of the MSCA, with a strong collaboration with the industry and the SMEs. And we hope to achieve some structuring impact on organizations through, through these research programs to kind of level the playing field within Europe. So we are in the excellence science pillar with the European Research Council and research infrastructure, with a total budget of 6.6 billion euros for the whole of Horizon Europe. This is for all of Marie Skłodowska reactions. And for Doctoral Networks in particular, we are one of 5 MSCA programs. And for 2023, the budget is around 435 million euros. The call was open on the 30th of May, and the deadline is 28th of November this year. So just to start off, maybe most of you know that, but what are doctoral networks? Doctoral networks are basically one consortium composed of universities, industries, research centers, and this consortium will propose an overall coherent research project, and also a number of individual PhD research projects that are somehow interlinked and that form a coherent whole with the overall research project for PhD students that they will recruit in the future. So the reason why I'm saying that is that we always receive every year individual fellowship from fellows who want to do a PhD with one institution. So that's not eligible. It's really one consortium proposing a network with a number of PhD projects. What are the expected outcomes of this program? We expect benefits both from the doctoral candidate, and you will see later, doctoral candidate is what we call the PhD fellows that you will recruit, and the participating organizations. So the idea is to train creative, entrepreneurial, innovative, and resilient doctoral candidates, and really improve their long-term employability in the academia, but also outside the academia, expose these fellows to the academic and non-academic sector. And you're going to do that through research skills, training through research, obviously, through their individual research project, and also more formal kinds of trainings, technical training, and also transferable skills, which are also called soft skills from time to time. You will propose secondments between the members of the networks, including intersectoral secondments. You're going to have career development plans set up with these fellows that you're going to revise on a regular basis. You're going to supervise these fellows. And basically, we expect also enhanced cooperation and knowledge transfers between the sectors and between the disciplines. What's in it for Europe? Basically, for Europe, the idea is to, well, as I said before, increase the human capital base in research and innovation by training highly skilled doctoral candidates, improve the attractiveness of the careers in research in Europe through better working and employment conditions, foster talent and knowledge circulation through the 3 kinds of mobilities between sectors, between disciplines, and between countries. All of that to enhance the quality of research in Europe to contribute to its sustainable competitiveness. Now, doctoral networks in particular, so as I said before, those are multi-beneficiary actions. So there are several entities forming the network. And there are basically 3 modalities of types of actions in doctoral programs. You have the standard doctoral network. You have the industrial doctorate. I will tell you a bit more on that, with a strong focus on the industrial involvement. And there's a joint doctorates, which aim to have more of a structuring effect on doctoral training, with the provision of joint, double, or multiple doctoral degrees between the participating organizations. And for those, there is a pre-agreement for joint degrees that are required at the proposal stage, but you will see that there is a template for that. If you want to submit a proposal and you go to the funding and tender portal, you will have the template of the proposal, and everything is explained in the template. So basically 3 modes, and what you also need to know is that the 3 modes compete within the same scientific panel. So say that you have the life science panel, for instance, industrial doctorate proposal will compete with the standard doctoral network, which will compete with a joint doctorate. So there is no budget or earmarked for each individual mode. All 3 modes compete within each other. Now, what are the features of doctoral networks? And they are very important news for 2023. The first one is that the size of all doctoral networks programs, so all the implementation mode, is up to 540 person month. So that was not the case last year. Now it's for each and every mode, you can request up to 540 person month. Now, in terms of program duration, so now we're talking not about the individual fellowship, the contract you give to each fellow, but the overall network's duration. That's maximum 48 months for standard DN and the industrial doctorates, and it's maximum 60 months for the joint doctorates. So you basically have 1 year more for the joint doctorates. And the reason for that is that the duration of each fellowship for standard doctoral networks and industrial doctorates, it's still between 3 and 36 months. So basically, that means that for a standard doctoral network, you can recruit up to 15 fellow for 36 months to make up a total of 540 person month. But there's a new incentive for joint doctorates that you can give a fellowship contract for up to 48 months for fellows in the joint doctorate, right? So that also increases the overall duration of the overall program by 1 year. So basically, that means that once your project starts, you have up to 12 months to recruit all the fellows. In terms of secondments, fellows can go on secondments worldwide. There is no limits for that. And for doctoral networks, the standard ones, you're limited to 1/3 of the fellowship duration. So 12 months if it's 36 months total. But there is no limit for industrial doctorates and joint doctorates. So you can, an entity can recruit a fellow for 36 months and send them for secondment in another institution for more than 1/3 of their total contract duration. For DNID, so there are additional eligibility requirements. So all the fellows in an industrial doctorate, they need to spend at least 50% in the non-academic sector. All right. So the academic and the non-academic institution can be in the same countries, that doesn't matter. And they can go to the non-academic sector either in another beneficiary as non-academic or as an associated partner. AP stands for associated partners. So, yeah, and there is no limitation for secondments, right, for industrial doctorates. And the academic and non-academic organizations have to jointly supervise the fellow. Now, for joint doctorates, all the fellows have to be enrolled in a joint or double or multiple PhD. And this PhD has to be delivered by entities located in at least 2 member state or associated countries. So MS member state, AC associated countries. There should be joint admission, selection, training, supervision and governance of these fellows. And there are letter of pre-agreements to deliver these degrees. And there's a template. I mean, there's a template in the proposal template, as I said before. Now, I've talked about academic, not academic institution. What does that mean for us? So basically, academic sector is public or private higher education establishment. public or private non-profit research organization, or international European research organization. This is a definition of academic sector. And the non-academic sector is a definition by exclusion. Any entity that's not part of this academic sector is non-academic. So the reason why I insist on that is that it has nothing to do with private or public. You see that the private non-profit research organization is in the academic sector in our definition. So pay attention to that if you have, if you want to submit an industrial doctorate. Pay attention to the definition of non-academic sector for MSCA. Now, in terms of eligibility rules, we have a number of them. So first, the composition of the network. The network should be composed of at least 3 independent legal entities from 3 different member states or associated countries. And of these 3, at least 1 should be from an EU member state. Now, this is the minimum. Of course, you can have a consortium that's much larger than that, but this is the minimum condition. Also, all beneficiaries must recruit at least 1 doctoral candidate. If you have 1 entity that wants to become a beneficiary but does not recruit, that's not possible. So the network size in terms of number of beneficiaries is somehow limited by this rule. And these entities are required to host at their premises and supervise the researchers that they will recruit. In order to ensure some geographical balance within the network, no more than 40% of the EU contribution should go to beneficiaries of the same country. So pay attention to that. It's really 40% of the EU contribution, so the final budget. So don't just look at the number of person month, because there is a country correction coefficient for the salary of the fellow. So if you're in a high income country with a higher cost of living, the country coefficient is higher and you reach more easily the 40%. There are some specific eligibility conditions for the industrial and joint doctorates, which I talked a bit before, and I will talk about them after. And there are also resubmission restrictions for proposals scoring below 80% in the last call. So the resubmission restrictions is only from one call to the next. So if you had less than 80% in the 2021 call, you can resubmit a proposal in the 2023 call. But if you submitted a proposal last year in the 2022 call and you had below 80%, you should not resubmit the same proposal in the current call. You have to wait for 2024. So who can apply? Basically any legal entity from anywhere in the world. It's not restricted to Europe and associated countries, but not all the applicants are automatically eligible for funding. A little bit more on that later, but just to quickly explain, there will be the link to all this document, but there is a Horizon Europe program guide which lists a number of countries which can apply and be automatically eligible. And you will see basically that those are the low to middle income countries. So what that means in practice is that if you have a high income third country like the US, Canada, Japan wants to be part of a consortium as a beneficiary, they can apply, but they're not eligible to receive funding from us. Only on exceptional cases can they do that. But the low to middle income countries, and you will see a list in the Horizon Europe program guide, they're automatically eligible for funding. So you can have consortia of any actors, universities, businesses, or other socioeconomic actors, and there's no minimum or maximum number for associated partners. And I've talked about associated partners for a while now without telling you what it is exactly. So we have 2 types of participants for doctoral networks. We have the beneficiaries and the associated partners. Now, the beneficiaries, as the name would suggest, they benefit directly from EU funds. So they sign the grant agreement, they recruit the researchers, each beneficiary has to recruit at least 1 researcher, and they directly claim costs. The associated partners, on the other hand, they do not sign the grant agreement, they cannot recruit researchers, and they don't directly claim costs. But you might say, what's in it for them in the project? Well, actually, they can be part of a project, of a network, and they can host seconded researchers. For instance, could be a non-academic institution that hosts a researcher to make up for the 50% of their time in an industrial doctorate, for instance. They participate in the supervisory board, and they can be academic or non-academic. They don't directly claim cost, but they can indirectly claim cost. But this is an internal matter of the consortium. I will tell you a bit more on that later when I tell you about the funding principles of the doctoral networks. Now, I told you before that some countries are eligible. I mean, all countries are eligible, but not all of them are eligible for funding. Basically, you have the EU countries, so member states and their territories, overseas territories, so they are fully eligible. Countries associated to Horizon Europe, like Norway, Israel, Turkey, they are fully eligible to receive funding, and the low and middle income countries are also eligible. Other countries are eligible for funding when announced in the call, but there is no such thing in the DN call. But they can receive funding exceptionally if their participation is deemed essential for the project. So what does it mean, essential? Well, it could be, for instance, that an entity in a high-income third country has access to some data that no one else has access to. So their participation should be essential for that reason. Bear in mind that this is very exceptional, and most of the time their participation is not deemed essential and their funding is not granted, but there is a possibility. A specific case for international organization. So international European research organizations are eligible for funding, but other international organizations are not eligible. And it follows the same rule as the high-income third countries. They can be funding exceptionally if their participation is essential. So 27 member states. This is the list of associated countries. As you see, Morocco and United Kingdom, this is still ongoing, and they're in the process of being associated. Switzerland is not an associated country, just a reminder. But I always advise you to go to the Horizon Europe program guide and to see always the latest updated list. So I don't advise you to download it and to consult it. I advise you to always go to the website so that you are sure that you always have the last version. So that was the conditions for the entities, for the network, the eligibility conditions. Now, if you submit a proposal and your proposal is granted funding, the next step is that you will need to recruit the eligible researchers. So, and there are eligibility conditions for those researchers. So first off, they must be doctoral candidates. And what we mean by that is that they should not already have a doctoral degree at the date of recruitment. The other condition is that they have to be recruited following an open, merit-based and transparent recruitment procedure. So this is important. You have to be able to show that the process of recruitment was open, merit-based, and transparent. The researchers must all be enrolled in the doctoral program. So in the doctoral networks and in the industrial doctorates, they have to be enrolled in a doctoral program in at least one EU member state or associated country. So bear that in mind, because I told you that the low to middle income countries could participate and get funding. Yes, that is true. But if they recruit a fellow, this fellow has to be enrolled in a PhD in an EU member state or an associated country. And that's not always easy. So I prefer to tell you from the onset. And for joint doctorates, all fellows should be enrolled in a doctoral program in at least 2 member state or associated countries, right? Now, the fellows can be of any nationality. It's not restricted at all to Europeans, so could be of any nationality in the world. And there is a mobility rule. That's the same for all the Marie-Skłodowska reactions, is that they should not have resided or carried out their main activity in the country where they are recruited for more than 12 months in the previous 3 years, right? So the idea is that you don't fish in your pond of master's degree students. You have to open the recruitment, make it open, merit-based and transparent, and there's a mobility at the core of the MSCA actions. So these are just for illustrative purposes what could be a consortium. So you would see what looks like a Greek temple would be the academic institution, and what looks like a tiny factory would be the non-academic institutions. So you have the group of beneficiaries, and attached to it you have the associated partners that don't sign the grant agreement, they don't receive funds, but they can host seconded fellows, they can provide training as well, they can do these sorts of things. But all the fellows have to be enrolled in a PhD, right? And you see in that case, like the Italian entity has 3 fellows, the Norwegian 2. Now, if you go to industrial doctorates, the same story, except that in addition to that, all the fellows must spend at least 50% of their time in the non-academic sector. So it could be either in another non-academic sector beneficiary or in a non-academic associated partner, right? So might be easier for some non-academic partner if they don't want to have to recruit fellows. They can be associated partner and just host seconded fellows. And for joint doctorates, looks a bit like the standard doctoral networks, except that all the fellows have to be in a joint double or multiple degree. What do we mean by joint double multiple? Basically, a joint degree is a single diploma from at least 2 academic institutions from 2 different countries, and a multiple degree is 2 or more separate degrees recognized officially. And again, there is a letter of agreement that's mandatory in the proposal. Oops, that's a table that looks a bit daunting, so I will not read all of that, but you will get the slides. Basically, that's a summary, that's an overview of the eligibility conditions for the 3 modes: doctoral networks, IDs, JDs. All right. In terms of funding, that's pretty straightforward. We work with the system of unit cost. So basically, 1 unit is 1 person month. Okay, so that means that if a university recruits 1 fellow for 36 months, at the end of the project, they would have received 36 units, and it's 100% reimbursement rate. So that's pretty straightforward. And there's different cost categories. There's the researcher's cost and the institutional cost, and that looks like that, basically. You have on the left side what goes to the recruited researcher. So you have the living allowance, which is the salary of the fellow. There is a little asterisk there to tell you that there is a country correction coefficient that applies to this salary for ensuring the purchasing power parity for researchers. So that means that, for instance, a fellow in the Netherlands will receive more money per month than the fellow in Portugal, for instance, because of the country coefficient. And this is a gross amount. This is not the net amount. There is a mobility allowance that all fellows should receive, because by definition, they have to undergo mobility, otherwise they're not eligible. Family allowance for those that are entitled to it. I will not dwell on the 2 other allowances, because this is next step during the implement of the project. If need be, there's other types of allowance for long-term leave or special needs. So this is for the fellows, and all of this money has to go to the fellows. Now, there is one money for one cost category for the institutions, and that's a research training and networking contribution, and the management and in-year contribution. So that's basically 2,800 per month per fellow, all right? So this institutional cost, this can be redistributed within the consortium as the consortium sees fit. So this would usually be written in the consortium agreement that you will sign later. And that means that, for instance, this could pay for associated partners hosting seconded fellows, for instance. Or sometimes one entity could organize more trainings than others. Maybe one research project could be more costly than another one. So you can redistribute that. So that's not a problem. But the part on the left side, everything has to go to the fellow. So this 2,800 doesn't mean that, you know, your fellow needs to have 2,800 for, you know, per month of their activity for running the project. This is an overall basket for the whole project. Now, the evaluation criteria, how are these proposals evaluated? So quite quickly, I put this slide because not everybody knows that our evaluation process is that each and every proposal is evaluated by 3 independent experts. These experts we hire from the outside world, so those are peers, I mean your peers, and each of them will write an individual evaluation report. So at this stage, the experts don't know what the other experts are. So nobody knows who else evaluates the same proposal. So they write the individual evaluation report. Once this is done, then they have to sit together in a consensus group and agree. They have to agree between themselves on what they think about the proposal, their assessment of the proposal. So basically, they will have to decide on a consensus set of comments and the consensus score. And this is what is communicated to the applicants at the end of the evaluation, the consensus report. Or in case a consensus cannot be reached, because it can happen sometimes, then we can appoint a 4th or 5th expert, and eventually they agree on a common view. Now, these experts, they cannot, of course, invent how they are going to assess the proposal. There are criteria and sub-criteria that they need to follow. So those are the sub-criteria. This is a shortened version because it would be too, it would clutter the table, but those you can see it on the funding and tender portal. Basically, you have the excellence criterion, and you have sub-criteria within this criterion. So the experts will assess the quality and pertinence of the project's research and innovation objectives, the methodology, the training program, the quality of the supervision, and then this will define the set of comments for excellence and the score. The same goes for impact, and the same goes for the implementation. Now there's a weighting between these 3 criteria. So the biggest weight goes to excellence with 50%, then impact 30%, and then implementation 20%. And what we mean by priority at the very bottom, it means that if there are proposals with the same score, the exact overall same score, basically we differentiate them by order of priority. The one having the highest score in excellence comes first. Then if that we cannot differentiate the proposal, then the impact is taken to differentiate them. And if you cannot differentiate them, then it goes to implementation. And if that doesn't work, then we have other ways, but this is written in a work program. It's not something that we invent. Now, how to apply? So this is the print screen from the 2021 Doctoral Networks. So I should change that. But basically, you go to the funding and tenders opportunities portal. If you type DN in the search engine, you will automatically find all the Doctoral Networks call. You just click on the 2023, and you will get to the call page. And on this call page, you'll find all the documents that you need. It's a one-stop shop for everything. So you'll get the work program that you can read, that you should read. You'll see the Horizon Europe annexes, like the program guide I told you about that tells you which countries are eligible. You will see the guide for applicants, and you will see the proposal templates, and you will see the frequently asked questions. So basically, your proposal is structured in 2 overall parts. The part A is structured data that you have to enter in the system. This is mostly administrative, budget, participants, their contact details, and things like that. And you have the part B, that is a descriptive part. So you have a template that you need to fill in, and you upload this. So this is a narrative part. There's a page limit for part B1, a page limit of 30 pages. Please don't go beyond the page limit. It will be blanked out anyway, so experts will not be able to assess it. And then the part B2. If you go to the proposal template, everything will explain itself. I strongly advise you really to read the proposal template as early as possible, because in this template, you have all the explanations of what you need to insert in all the sections of the proposal. So really read it. And also the 2023 proposal template is a bit different than the 2022. And the 2022 was a bit different than the 2021. So please use the latest template and read it carefully. So basically, just a few words of advice. Read carefully the work program, the guidance document, really use the proposal template, read carefully the evaluation form. This is also in the funding and tender portal. You will see all the criteria and sub-criteria. Don't underestimate any part of the proposal. This is a very competitive program. Last year, the success rate was about 15%. So there's excellence, impact, and implementation. You need to be very good. You need to be excellent in all three sections to be able to get funded. Write all sections clearly and in coherence with the other sections. Perform an internal peer review with your consortium partners. Consult your national contact points. They're a gold mine of information. And don't leave the submission for the last minute. As a rule of thumb, think like an evaluator, write for an evaluator. So write the evaluation form and think, if you were an evaluator, how would you assess your proposal? There's a number of resources available. Basically, you can, if you go to the funding and tender opportunities portal, you have all the documents there. So you have the Horizon Europe program guide, MSCA program guide. Here you also have the guidelines on supervision. Of course, your national contact points, you should contact them if you have any questions. They are very knowledgeable. If you have questions you want to ask ourselves directly, there's a research inquiry service. And if there is a question that pops up regularly, then it ends up in the FAQs. So you can find the answer directly. I'd like also to tell you that we will have tomorrow actually an information day organized by us. So I invite you to register. I will put the link in the chat for you to see. And basically that's it. Just the last word. If you want to work as an expert, you have to register in our database. You go to the funding and tender portal. In case of doubt, always go to the funding and tender portal and you click on work as an expert and you can register. Obviously, we pay great attention to conflicts of interest. So if you are going to submit a proposal or you know someone who's going to submit a proposal in 2023, we're never going to hire you as an expert, but for the future, if you want to be part of it, we'd be glad to enrich our database. And thank you very much. That was it from my side. And I will stop sharing now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Then, yeah, we head over now to Nadesh, who will moderate the Q&A session. We have received several questions during the webinar, so please go ahead, Nadesh.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Margot. Yes, so I'm Nadesh Rico from the MSCA NCP for the French-speaking community of Belgium. And the first question is not addressed to Mr. Giordani. What are the options to provide a standard 4 years PhD for students in Doctoral Networks and Doctoral Networks Industrial? Is there additional funding from the FWO? Well, maybe I can let Margot answer about the FWO, but if the question is also useful for the French-speaking institutions, I would say that each person should ask his or her own institution if something exists. And Margot, if you want to complete.
Yes, yeah, I can also confirm that FWO does not provide additional funding for doctoral networks. So indeed, yeah, the host institutions, they will have to find other funding sources for this.
Thank you. The second question is, given the associated country status of the UK, can a UK partner be a beneficiary in a proposal for the current call?
So the answer is yes. So same thing as last year, basically, because the association agreement is in progress, UK entities can submit a proposal, can be part of consortia that submit a proposal, but at the time of the grant agreement signature, if they are not, if the association agreement is not signed yet, then they will not be eligible to receive funding, and then
they cannot be beneficiary, right?
Yes, they cannot be beneficiaries. Yes, exactly.
Okay, so they can leave the consortium, or they can change status to associated partner. That's
Yes. Well, the thing is, okay, it's something that's decided above my pay grade, but for the moment, that was the status, meaning that they were asked to either change it to an associated partner or to leave the consortium. Now, I cannot really say how it's going to be for the 2023, because that's going to be in almost 1 year, so maybe things will change. Maybe the approach will change, but so far that's been the approach, yes.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
SG and Nadesh already put the link to more information about the UKRI guarantee funding that is available. But I think at the moment it covers funding for all Horizon Europe calls with a call deadline before the end of September, if I'm not correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. And the deadline of the MSCA, the end 2023 call is a bit later. So, but in any case, they since the existence of this guarantee fund, they have always prolonged, prolonged the funding. So this is already the 5th wave, I think. So it is expected that it will be extended, this guarantee.
Exactly. We don't see why they would not do that again if they need to. I mean.
Yes,
Okay.
I have no additional information than you on this.
Thank you. Another question is, do I understand it correctly that no letter of commitment is required for the associated partner?
Yes, you understand correctly. I'm not sure that I put it in the slides, but indeed, it's also written in the guide for applicants. It's not required any longer to have a letter of commitment for an associated partner. Is it recommended or helpful or expected? No, it's not expected. It will not be helpful. I mean, it's not needed at all. Now, of course, in your proposal, if there is an associated partner that does something, you will have to explain in the proposal what this associated partner will do in the network. But we don't need a letter of commitment that is signed with, you know, the headers and everything. No, we don't need that at all.
Thank you. Next one, what are the options to include a Swiss company within the Doctoral Networks scheme?
Well, I mean, it's the same rule as if they were a US entity, basically. So they are not associated, and it's obviously a high-income country. So they could be associated partner, for instance. That's not a problem. So they could be associated partner and host secondments. I see that the follow-up of the question was, can they be an industrial partner? So they could be an industrial, obviously non-academic, associated partner and host secondments. That's not a problem. Yes, they cannot be beneficiary. That's it. So they cannot recruit.
Thank you. Another one is, in case of clinical professional interested in doing a PhD, could they have a contract of 50% of time, or the PhD do they have to be engaged at 100%?
So I will need to double check this, but I think they have to be 100% on their PhD. I don't think for professional reasons part-time is allowed anymore, but let me double check and I'll go back to you, Nadesh, on this question.
Thank you. Another one is how big a consensus group should be. And I think Nancy wanted to answer.
Yes, hi. Usually the consensus group consists of 3 independent experts. So these are the ones who in the first phase of the individual each have evaluated the proposal, and then they come together in its 3. In case there are strongly diverging views, which can happen, there might be a 4th or even a 5th expert, but this is rather rare and this is in exceptional cases.
Thank you. Another question is, can the training session be virtual?
I guess this is for you, right? Maybe, I guess it's a training session that you're going to organize with the NCP of Belgium, or?
I think indeed, yeah. I think
okay,
to
sorry.
that, the 6th of July session.
Okay,
no,
sorry, I didn't get it. Indeed.
It is
Okay.
indeed on site. Yeah, also because we're working with real proposals that were submitted previously, and yeah, it's not something that we can digitally provide. So it's on site, and it's also good for dynamics, good for questions, and that's the best way to get the best out of it, we think.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was confused. The next question is, as PhD track is mandatory in every doctoral network project, how come funding for a 4-year assignment is only granted in Doctoral Networks joint doctorates?
Well, this is an old question, I would say. I mean, let's say a recurrent question. Well, the first level answer is that, well, because this is how the program was set up. I have to say that it's been debated for years now, but you know, there is a program committee members that, you know, the program is developed in cooperation with them, and basically. I think the reason is that in the landscape of PhD programs in the European Union, well, there's a consensus to go for 3 years and not for 4 years. I know this issue has been raised several times, but for the moment, it's only for JD. Now, yes, the PhD track is mandatory for every DN project. It has been for quite a while now. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing more I can tell you than if so I don't know what is the mandatory duration of PhDs in Belgium is, I have to say, but if it's more than 3 years, if it's a 4-year mandatory PhD, then you have to find other sources of funding for the 4th year of the fellow. That's the only thing I can tell you, because for the moment it's and I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. This is only for 3 years.
Thank you. Another question is, when will an annotated version of the UNET model grant agreement become available?
So I was told that it would come soon, but how soon is soon? I can't really tell you that because I don't know myself. But they're working on this, so it should soon come. But yeah, I guess the answer is a bit disappointing, but I have no other answer than that.
Thank you. Next is, could you please explain the role of B1 and B2 parts? What are the differences? Is it a 1 or 2-step evaluation process?
No, it's a 1-step evaluation process, and part B1 and B2 are complementary. You'll see basically that the structure of the part B1 follows the criteria and sub-criteria of the evaluation. There is still important information in part B2. For instance, in part B2, you have the description of the different entities that participate to the consortium. So the explanation on the beneficiaries, the infrastructure they have, the time commitment that the supervisors will grant to the doctoral candidates, things like that. So this is all part. Also, experts will select some of these parts, read parts of part B2 in order to assess, for instance, the quality of supervision, for instance, or the complementarity of the consortium, because you have these descriptions there. So the idea is that you're limited to 30 pages on part B1, but in part B2, you have no limitation. So you can expand a bit more on each entity, infrastructure, and full-time equivalent commitment to the project and things like that. But it's a one-step evaluation. Yeah.
Okay. Next question is, when will an overview of the doctoral candidate's rights and obligations become available, similar to the one in Horizon 2020 ITN projects?
Yes, this is also in the making, but it should be available soon. But this is clear that it's going to be sooner than the annotated model grant agreement. So there's it's being developed now, and it will soon be distributed to everyone. I think it's more a matter of weeks, something like that. Yes.
Thank you. Next is, if I have a minimum consortium with 3 beneficiaries in a standard MSCA doctoral network, so 2 member states and 1 associated country, one of them being an institute in Israel, who would need to link up with one of the other beneficiaries to award the PhD degree. Would this fulfill the requirements?
So I'm not sure I understand clearly the question, because the institute in Israel cannot deliver the PhD degree. Is that the question? Because
Indeed, yeah, that's
okay.
what I mean. Yeah.
Right. Well, then another entity. So you could have an associated partner in Israel delivering the PhD. That might be the easiest, because then the fellow is, the PhD awarding entity is closer to the fellow in case there are some mandatory training that the fellow has to do during the course of their PhD. Or so an associated partner anywhere in the world, but probably in Israel it's easier, could deliver the PhD, or somebody else from the consortium. You just have to wait potentially the additional difficulty for a fellow to be most of the time in one country, but being enrolled in a different country. So that might be a bit more difficult. That's why I propose to have an associated partner in Israel, but that's entirely up to you.
Thank you. When will the MSCA handbook for call 2023 be available? I guess this is more a question for us, Margot, because the handbooks are made by the network of MSCA NCPs, MSCA Nets, and I'm not sure we have the answer.
So the 2022 call handbook is available on the website of MSCA Net, and I think I think I mentioned something in the coming weeks that the next handbook for the 2023 call will be made available. So it will be soon made available. That's what I've heard.
Thank you, Margot. Next one. Is it possible to include in the consortium an associated partner from country X to award the PhD for a doctoral candidate employed by a non-academic beneficiary from country Y? Are there specific aspects to consider in the application in such a case?
No, not necessarily. I think I touched on that while replying to the previous question. So you can, so all the fellows have to be enrolled in a PhD, but it doesn't mean that all the beneficiaries have to be PhD awarding entities. So they can award, the fellows can be awarded their PhD through another university from the consortium, could be in a different countries, but they can also, you can also have an associated partner just for the awarding of the degree. So it could be in a different country. Just have to make it clear in the application where the fellow would be enrolled for their PhD, because this is an eligibility that all the fellows need to be enrolled in a PhD. So you would have to say in a member state or associated country. So you would have to clearly state that in the application. But there is no specific aspect to consider more than that. As I said, it's probably easier to have them in the same country, but that's on a case-by-case basis, and that's so yes, it's possible, but country X should be a member state or an associated country, basically, in that
Thank you.
question.
Another question: to comply with the mobility rule for the recruited doctoral candidates, do we need to check their legal or actual place of residence?
Actual place of residence. Yes.
Thank you. The last question, do we have an eligible consortium if we have 3 entities from 3 member states, with one being a Hungarian institution not entitled for funding?
Well, so normally there's the Hungarian institution, Hungary being a member state, they should be entitled to funding. So I don't know what specific case you refer to, but that's in some cases because of other political matters or because of previous audits. Some entities cannot receive funding for other reasons. That's something for later. That's not something for the evaluations, for the evaluation as such. In any case, I would assume, well, that's not a problem for the evaluation, but that would be something to consider for the grant agreement preparation. If it turns out that one entity is not entitled to funding for whatever reason, then replacement should be found, or they could participate but with their own funds, and then you would need to replace this to have the minimum quorum. I assume that you would not have a consortium with just 3 entities, but if that was the case, you just had 3 entities, you would need to replace this one if it was not entitled to funding. But for the purpose of the evaluation, this is a member state, so this would be, they would be eligible, the consortium would be eligible, and the proposal would be evaluated.
Okay, thanks. The last question is for Margot and I, about the writing training session on the 6th of July. The registration should open this afternoon. We are working on it. And about the location, maybe I will let Margot talk.
Yeah, it will take place at Hoek 38, so Leuvenseweg 38,000 Brussels. That's the location.
Okay.
The max number of participants, yeah, there's a limited participation indeed. So yeah, due to room capacity, of course, to get the most out of the training. So yeah. Once the registration opens, yeah, and you're interested, go ahead and register yourself, and yeah, we will see how big the demand is, and yeah, then you will receive from us a message if you can attend or not.
Yeah, I think that's it about the question and answer side for